Okay, so Kale cut out our seat blank at the bandsaw, and we are going to flip the seat upside down. Very important. So this is the underside of the seat, and we're going to return to our pattern and mark the location for the leg mortises.
Now that the mortises are drawn in, I'm going to reestablish that center line. This is going to be the guideline for our sight lines that we're about to draw. The sight lines are these lines right here. Now, to copy our sight lines onto the seat, I'm going to see where the end of this line meets our center line and draw a tick mark. And do the same for this sight line. I also want to note that I think it's really tempting when drawing in the sight lines to just connect all dots, and that's not the way to go about this. This is why we established our sight lines with the tick mark. Now it's time to connect everything. I can refer back to the pattern if things get confusing here. From my pattern, I can tell that this tick mark connects these two mortises, which are my back legs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with my yardstick. Now it's pretty obvious that this tick mark is connected to our front legs. And that's it. These are our sight lines. You can double check with your pattern. That looks pretty right to me.
Okay, so we're gonna drill the back legs first, and the resultant angle for that is 29 degrees. Already got it here on the pattern. So I'm gonna set my bevel gauge to that. All right, so just like before, I have our seat clamped to the bench with the underlayment underneath to prevent any tear out. And I have my bevel gauge set to 29 degrees for the back legs. So we're drilling the mortises next to this curve here. Those are gonna be our back legs. And you'll hear us use the term resultant angle. The resultant angle refers to the angle at which you are drilling the mortise. So ours is gonna be 29 degrees back this way. So we have two references that we're going off of. We have our sight line, so that directs where we're gonna stand, what our drill is gonna be in line with. And then we have our bevel gauge set to 29, so we're gonna tilt our drill back 29 degrees and drill our leg mortise. All right, and once again, I'm gonna tape down my bevel gauge because she's petite. All right, so I'm standing in line with the sight line we drew from the pattern, and then I'm gonna try to follow as best I can, keeping my drill parallel to this bevel gauge. It's probably not gonna be surgically perfect. If it's not, life goes on. It's not gonna make your chair explode. Chairs can kind of deal with having these slight imperfections, and you can move forward and mess with it. It's really not the biggest deal. So we're gonna do the best we can, because that's all we can do. And just a little tip, there's this seam on the drill from where the plastic was molded. It's kind of nice to line up the blade of your bevel gauge with that. That'll keep you in line with your sight line. That went great. I thought it was fighting me a little bit. All right, so now I'm drilling the mortises for the front legs. I just gotta mention, make sure the seat's upside down. I have my resultant angle set at 16 degrees, and I'm gonna line up with this sight line and drill right through. All right, so now all of our mortises are cut into our seat. We're gonna move on to the legs and cutting the tenons for our legs. So we have two different types of materials here. Kale has these post hole diggers, handles, replacement handles.
Yeah.
Put it back together. All right, so we're gonna get into the bandsaw tenon technique. This is how you can cut round tenons on round stock at a bandsaw. So I set this stop block back here. It's 2 1/4 inches behind the front of the teeth, and that sets the length of our tenon. And then I have my fence right now set to about 1 1/8 inches. With this post hole digger stock, we actually ran into more issues than we thought we were gonna have because they're actually quite inconsistent in diameter. It's thicker up here, it tapers in a little bit, it gets thicker again. So it's not really the kind of material that you can just show up, set up a jig, and just run with it to infinity. So these are about 1 3/8 inches, which means I need to take 3/8 of an inch off to achieve a 1-inch round tenon. And you can use math for this, but since this stock is so unreliable, what I've been doing is just drawing a 1-inch tenon on the end grain here and just doing it by eye, setting it up and locking the fence when it hits the pencil line. So Kale and Chris bought a lot of replacement handles for these post hole diggers when they were at the home center, and I've already messed up like 4 of them. It felt like there were evil forces at play because I thought I had my jig set up correctly, and then I would end up with the tiniest tenon in the world. So I'm just going to continue by doing this by eye and resetting it each time, because if I mess up another leg, I don't think I will emotionally recover. And so the way this process actually works is we have all our stop blocks set up, we have our fence set up, run it through the saw till it hits the stop block, pull it out, rotate, run it through the saw, and keep doing that. And then as you continue to do that, it's going to start forming that round tenon. And once you've gotten rid of all the waste material and it's almost complete, you can take it to the stop block and then rotate it all the way around without taking it back, and that's going to clean up your shoulder.
So if you don't have a bandsaw, that's no problem. I'm gonna show you how to tenon your legs by hand with a block plane. So first I want to talk about my setup here. I have a piece of lament clamped to my bench, and that's so I have space to set my leg on my bench. My underlayment is acting as a stop. I also have my combination square and pencil handy because I'm gonna have to mark the diameter of my tenon on the end of my leg here. So because this leg is 1.25 inches in diameter and I need an inch tenon, I need to shave off 1/8 around this entire tenon. So I end up with 1 inch in diameter. I also want to note that because this is slightly tapered, this stick is more of a cone shape on this end rather than a straight cylinder. So in order to make my tenon cylindrical instead of conical, I need to shave off more wood here. And I'll show you how I'll do that with just a block plane. Hey y'all, this is Kale. I was having a really hard time trying to explain this block planing method on camera, so I figured doing a voiceover of this technique instead would probably be a lot easier. So in order to block plane our leg tenons, I first needed to mark the point where I was block planing to. And I did this with my combination square. I set my combination square to 1/8 inch, and I marked that point around the entire circumference of the end of our leg. Now that I know what point I'm block planing to, I wedged the leg between my sheet of underlayment on my bench and my body, and got to work. Because this leg is already slightly tapered, I need to remove more material from the center of the leg to match the end of the leg. I did this by starting about 8 inches back from the end of the leg. I took my block plane and I made about 3 short strokes, about 3 inches in length. After making those 3 short strokes, I started back at 8 inches from the end again and did 2 medium strokes, this time about 5 inches in length. And lastly, I finished with 1 long stroke starting from the same 8 inches back and planing through the entire end of the leg. And that's basically the gist of it. I kept doing this over and over again until I hit my line on the end of my leg. Once I'd planed down to the line on the end of the leg, I would rotate the leg just a little bit and I would begin the planing process all over again. And I'd repeat this around the entire circumference of the leg. So once I'm finished, I'm left with a cylindrical tenon that is 1 inch wide and 2¼ inches long.
Okay, so I have my tenon straight off the bandsaw and it fits pretty good. It's a little bit tight, but I know we're gonna be able to drive it home because in the next step, we're gonna kerf these tenons. And the kerf is the name for the negative space left behind by the blade. And we cut the kerf into the tenons because once it's glued up, we're gonna wedge those tenons and that'll make the joint all the more stronger.